Reverb and time-based effects are key for adding space and dimension into your mixes. Just take a listen to this track before and after reverb and delays have been added. We often use these tools without knowing too much about them or how to tweak the parameters to serve the purpose the best. So in this video, we're going to break down the basics of time-based effects like reverb and delay and how you can effectively use them in your mixes. Before we get started, we're going to be using Neutron 4, Nectar 3, Reverb and Symphony. So head over to the description box below to download the free trials of those plugins so you can follow along. When a sound is reflected in space, it bounces off different surfaces, creating reflections which are known as reverb. In the past, we've used churches, halls and chambers to achieve the desired reverb sounds, and afterwards studios would use plate and spring reverbs to recreate them, but now, thanks to plugins like Reverb and Symphony, we can create the perfect space straight from the door. Recording studio spaces often have quite minimal reverb. This is so we can accurately record the instruments and vocals that are being played without any reflections interfering, and we then have the freedom to dial in the perfect delays and reverbs afterwards. Delays are created by duplicating the audio signal and then creating repetitions or echoes. Let's start with a few common parameters you will see in most reverb and delay effects. With reverb, you will notice the wet and dry mix will control the balance between the dry signal and the reverb and will determine how much of the reverb is being added. So you can dial in the perfect balance between your dry audio signal and the reverb.
And I don't want to fall in love again. Please, can I just keep my heart instead?
Pre-delay will add some separation between the instruments and the reverb, so it will give a little bit of time before the reverb kicks in, and this prevents the vocal, for example, or the instrument from being too washed out and drowned by the reverb.
Tell me something like what to say or do. I can't keep doing what I think is right for you.
Decay time will determine how quickly the sound dissipates in space, so longer decay times will result in a lush reverb tail that decays over a longer period of time, and shorter decay times will mean that the reverb will drop off much quicker.
And tell me something like what to say or do. I can't keep doing what I think is right for you.
Diffusion will determine the density of your reverb, and in some reverbs you will see that you can adjust the size of the space, which will also have an effect on the decay time.
And I don't want to fall in love again. Please, can I just keep my heart instead?
Equally, using delay will help you dial in the wet and dry balance between the dry signal and the delay signal.
And I don't want to fall in love again.
And we can control the delay times in milliseconds or note-based measures depending on whether your delay plugin is synced up with the tempo in your DAW. Feedback controls will create further repeats, and you'll also see other options like ping pong delays, which will pan the signal from left to right, and the ability to adjust the timing of left and right delays separately.
And tell me something like what to say or do. I can't keep doing what I think is right for you.
So now that we know the basics of what these effects do, how can we effectively implement them in our mixes? Reverb and delay effects can be used both creatively and to simply add some dimension and space around your instruments. Too much reverb and delays and too many conflicting reverbs and delays can present challenges in terms of muddiness and lack of clarity in a mix. So here are 5 tips that will help you effectively control reverb and delays in your mix and help you achieve the desired sound. Tip number 1 is using pre-EQ and post-EQ. Using reverb can introduce some unwanted frequency content into your mix, and using pre-EQ and post-EQ will help you tame that. In this example, let's use Reverb to help us add some clarity to our reverb. Using the assistant, I can set some key parameters that I'm looking for in my reverb. So that will be the style, tone, wet and dry balance, and size, for example. As I play back the audio, the assistant will set pre-EQ curves to clean up the input signal of my reverb, and also post-EQ to help me shape it further. Of course, if you don't have Reverb, you can apply the same process on your effects chain by just using a separate pre and post-EQ before and after your reverb respectively. But as you can see, it's very convenient to get it all done straight from the plugin. Now, once these pre-EQ and post-EQ curves are set, I can then tweak them further to polish my sound.
And I don't want to fall in love again. Please, can I just keep my heart instead? And I don't want to fall in love again. Please, can I just keep my heart instead?
Tip number 2 is using sidechain compression or ducking the reverb to make space for it. Do you want a lush reverb while still having a lot of clarity from the instrument or the vocal itself? Well, ducking is the perfect technique to use. You can easily achieve exactly that by using tail suppression and recovery in Stratus and Symphony. I will be using Symphony for this example, and I can set the amount of tail suppression that I want triggered by the input. So that means that every single time the vocal or the instrument is present, the plugin will duck the reverb tail. Then I can set the recovery time to determine how quickly the reverb tail is restored after the instrument or vocal stops playing. So by setting a longer recovery time, it will create a gap between the instrument and the reverb tail.
And tell me something like what to say or do. I can't keep doing what I think is right for you. And tell me something like what to say or do. I can't keep doing what I think is right for you.
If you're not using Symphony and Stratus, you can also create the same effect just by using sidechain compression with Neutron 4. So I'm adding Neutron 4 at the end of my effects plugin chain, and I'm setting the vocal as the input to trigger the compressor. So this means that Neutron 4 will duck my effects chain when the vocal is present, and then leaving a nice and lush tail at the end, giving the impression that the reverb and delays were there the whole time while still retaining a lot of clarity from the vocal itself.
And tell me something like what to say or do. I can't keep doing what I think is right for you. And tell me something like what to say or do. I can't keep doing what I think is right for you.
This is a great technique for creating a very lush and reverberant space while also retaining a lot of clarity and definition from the lead vocal or the instrument that you're applying this technique to. Tip number 3 is transient shaping. In my last video, I mentioned how transient shapers can be very effective in controlling your reverb, so let's have a look at this technique in more detail. By applying the transient shaper onto my reverb and delay bus, I can lower the sustain to create a more upfront effect, for example in a verse where I want the instrument or vocal to have more presence and reduce the amount of reverb that's being added in. And then I can simply automate the sustain control and really open up my reverb in choruses or maybe a bridge or wherever I want that more lush kind of reverb tail. I can also use the attack controls to manipulate the impact of my reverb. So for example, lowering the attack means that the reverb will create a smoother entrance into the mix, And increasing the attack will increase the initial impact of my reverb. Tip number 4 is using gates. So this is another great way to have a very lush and big reverb that is not decaying for a long period of time and is simply being cut off by gates. So this is another great technique for controlling reverb. Very often used on a snare, but you can use it on any element of your liking. Normally, you would add a gate after your reverb plugin, but in Symphony, you can create a gate straight from the plugin. The built-in gates function lets me set the threshold for the gate. So this will determine how loud the sound needs to be to open up the gate, and that means that everything else below that threshold will be gated or suppressed. Gate cut will determine how much the signal is reduced when it falls below the threshold. Gate hold will set up how long the gate stays open after the signal goes below the threshold. Gate recovery will determine how long it takes for the gate to reopen once the signal has gone above the threshold again. These are all time-based measures, which means you can dial them in to determine how sharp the gate will be, but that also means you can tweak them to sort of match the tempo of your track, and that can be very effective when you're using them on a percussive element like a snare, creating that kind of effect that the reverb is breathing along with the track. The last tip, number 5, is questions to ask yourself when you're making decisions on reverb and delay plugins. The way that you use these tools will depend on the project and the sound that you're looking to achieve, but it's important to keep in mind how they affect the overall mix and the dimension of your track. For example, you can use very big, bold, obvious delays as a creative effect, or you might just want to add a little bit of space and dimension to an instrument, and in that case, something like a harsh delay effect, where the delay time will be set to 40 milliseconds or below, might be the perfect choice for that purpose. Similarly, you could use reverbs to create big and lush tail ends, or use shorter reverbs and create a kind of drier sound which still has a little bit of space and dimension around your instruments or vocals. This is where thinking about the room and the ambience you're trying to create in your track is key. Sometimes combining different reverbs and room sizes will be the perfect way to dial in the sound that you're looking for, and you can easily do this from Neoverb by blending the different reverbs together to achieve your desired sound. You could also try using delays and reverbs together. There's no right or wrong as to which one you're using first in the plugin chain. The only thing to keep in mind is that if you're applying a delay after the reverb, that means it will delay the reverb signal and not just the dry signal. And if you're applying reverb after delay, that means the reverb will affect the delayed audio signal.
And I don't want to fall in love again. Please can I just keep my heart instead? And tell me something like what to say or do. I can't keep doing what I think is right for you.
The tools and techniques that we've covered in this video are great methods for controlling reverb and delay in your mixes, but there are also some creative techniques you could try. For example, try adding some saturation or distortion to your effects chain to create some extra harmonics and further process your time-based effects. I have a processing chain set up in Nectar 3, and I can simply add saturation to the delay module, choose from a range of different algorithms to dial in the perfect sound, and even apply modulation to it. I can also add some saturation to my reverb straight from Nectar 3 as well. Or you could also try adding compression after your time-based effects. For example, if you're applying compressor after the reverb, the quieter parts of your reverb will become more present and the louder parts of your reverb will be quieter, and that can lead to some very interesting choices. You could try detuning your time-based effects, apply panning and automations. You could tweak them throughout the mix with volume automation, because sometimes maybe having the same reverb level or the same sort of parameters on your reverb and delays can get a little bit tiresome, so you can apply some automation to those parameters. You could also automate the timing of your delays, for example, and you can have them gradually increase or decrease, and all of these automation techniques are just great ways to add further interest to these time-based effects. Another key thing to remember is that not everything will need the same amount of reverb and delays applied to them. I might be applying more reverb to my pad sounds, my cymbals, and maybe even backing vocals, but then I might be keeping certain elements quite dry and upfront in the mix, like kick and bass and the lead vocal. So this way I'm creating more dimension and space in my mix while still retaining a lot of clarity for those elements that I want to keep more upfront and present. Thank you so much for tuning in and taking the time to watch. We hope that you gained a deeper understanding of these time-based effects so that you can wield their power with finesse. Remember, control is key when it comes to shaping your audio. Now go forth and start creating some mesmerizing effects of your own. Subscribe to iZotope YouTube for more mixing and production tips and tricks.